In this episode, I'm joined by Nikki Hawyes, CEO of Whyte Bikes and one of the most private equity experienced executives in the cycling industry. Nikki's path is a fascinating one, from running a bike shop in Morzine, France in the early 2000s to senior commercial and board roles at Fisher Outdoor Leisure and Zyro Fisher, to managing director at Candid UK and now leading Whyte through a turnaround and into its next growth phase. Along the way, she's lived through 3 PE-backed businesses, multiple investment cycles, secondary buyouts, a near administration crisis, and the carve-out sale of Dorel Sports to Pawn. That experience gives her a uniquely candid view of what actually works and what doesn't when private equity meets the cycling business. We get into the realities of PE ownership in our industry, why realistic growth expectations matter more than hockey stick projections, how focus became the turning point at Whyte, and what it takes to lead a brand through crisis and back to profitability. Nikki brings a refreshingly pragmatic perspective to topics that usually generate more heat than light. I think you'll enjoy this one. This is the Business of Cycling podcast. Nikki, thanks so much for coming on. I'm excited to speak with you today. We had a really nice conversation before, and we have some really cool topics to jump into around the bicycle business. And what did we say? You're the most experienced PE manager, I guess, because you've worked many years with PE ownership, and so I thought that was really interesting to be able to dive into that. So I guess just to get started, where does this podcast find you today?
I'm actually working from near my home today. Actually, I'm not at my home because my home's been renovated, but I'm actually next door.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Renovations are traumatic. Hopefully it's going well, and the you've got good contractors, I hope, for you.
Yeah, actually I do. And I'm really pleased I didn't run it in parallel with selling the business last year. It
Oh,
literally, the sale closed and then we started the renovation 3 weeks later.
oh man. Yeah, no. Anything to do with homes and renovations is you're gonna add like a 2 or 3x to your stress levels.
Exactly.
So we've got some questions that I had kind of laid out, and I'm excited to jump in. Maybe just to start, you want to just give me a quick background where you're from, your early kind of your studies, and where you're from, and then we can get into the meat of the conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I'm British, born in the UK, and I went to university in the UK, studied business. I then went into a graduate scheme in the tech industry, selling large, multi-year, multi-million pound managed service contracts to government and defence, which was really interesting, a really great foundation, really where I started into sales and commercial roles. But I always had this passion to go and do something else. So when the opportunity came up and I had a real passion for snowboarding, I decided to go and move to the Alps after I've been working about 5 or 6 years. And I moved to Morzine in France, which was wonderful and a complete step change on many levels, very lifestyle focused, not career focused at all. I think I kidded myself that I was going there to improve my A-level French, but reality was that I was going there to snowboard. And then I loved it so much. And as the season came to a close, everybody started talking about riding bikes. And I had this old Diamondback hardtail with V brakes and I think about 1 inch of elastomer front travel. And I thought, okay, I'll give that a go in the Alps. That'd be fun. Quickly realized the bike wasn't really up to the job, but it really like sparked my interest and I got a better bike. And then I actually saw that there was this business opportunity to have a dedicated bike shop in Morzine. At that time, all the bikes that were being rented and the bike servicing was happening at ski shops. And the quality of the products wasn't probably as good as what was available elsewhere, on the market. And so I ended up buying 15 Kona bikes and then renting them out to customers, really just to kind of fund my lifestyle of staying out there. And then that just grew. One of my really good friends ran a snowboard shop, but she wasn't interested in running a bike shop in the summer. So I took her shop on and turned it into a bike shop in the summer. And that business just grew, and we did suspension servicing, parts and accessories, clothing sales, and as well as hire bikes as well. So it was really good fun. That was from 2003 to 2008. And in that time, I went to lots of downhill mountain biking events. I threw my hat in the ring and competed at a few events, not really successfully, although I did get some prize money once. And I also did the Mega Avalanche multiple times, which was crazy fun. And that was really when, I didn't want to stay in the Alps purely for the fact that I loved it, but I wanted to see what else the world had to offer me. And I thought, well, I don't really want to go back into the tech industry because I've been enjoying lifestyle over career for the last 6 years. So I thought, well, why didn't I go back into something I'm passionate about, which by then now was mountain biking, because I'd actually begun to love the summer seasons more than the winter seasons. And so I looked around and I went to work for a distributor. And the reason why I picked the distributor was they were distributing Troy Lee, which I wore to ride my bike in, SRAM and all the SRAM brands that came with that, RockShox, etc. And that was all spec'd on my bikes. And I thought, well, those are brands that I like and I use, so that might be a great place to start. And I joined a distributor called Fisher Outdoor Leisure, and they had gone through a management buyout with PE about 2 to 3 years before. So they were mid-investment cycle. So that was my first experience of joining a private equity-backed business and seeing kind of like what fast-paced growth was like. And yeah, that's how I joined the cycling industry in the UK.
So you were a small business owner for 5 years,
Yeah.
and and you decided to go back to we'll say employee. So I do talk to some entrepreneurs that that once they get into that and they never get out. But you went back to employee. Was there a specific reason where you're like, I just don't want all these headaches anymore, or was it, or maybe you felt that's just kind of how it went? Is there a rhyme or reason to that, or it just kind of happened?
I don't think uh, I don't think I ever really wanted to work for myself or not work for myself or not be an employee. I think I'm quite agile in types of business I've worked in. And I worked in a 80,000 employee tech business to move from that to being your
Bike shop
you
owner.
know, bike shop owner,
Yeah,
and then back into a small business, PE-backed business. It doesn't really, it's not something that really is kind of like at the top of my decision criteria. I think I'm quite agile to the environment that I find myself in. So yeah, that wasn't a motivation. The real motivation was I loved living in Morzine. I think it's a wonderful place, but I just didn't want to spend the rest of my life
right.
in Morzine. I wanted to go and see what else was around there. And it just happened to be that there was this role back in the UK, and that's where I went. I could have gone anywhere, but I took that role.
And where was the Fisher headquarters at that time?
So they were in about, I guess, 50K north of London,
Okay,
which also happened to be quite close to where I grew up.
perfect. And so I guess this is a really broad question, but you said that self-employment wasn't necessarily the core, and at the time you wanted to live in the Alps, and that was kind of a goal of yours. And then so coming back to working in Fisher, what was kind of driving you then?
Driving me to go and join Fisher.
What was driving you professionally? Because I guess I was
I want,
trying to understand where you were at professionally and where you wanted to go, because you mentioned very clearly that it was a lifestyle choice initially. And then I guess it was sort of a lifestyle choice that you wanted to be back into to see more of the world. Where was your mind at that time?
yeah, my mind was that I wanted to challenge myself. So running the bike shop was great, but it was a summer business. It wasn't a business that was all year round. And I thought, how do I make this business all year round? But actually, I decided I wanted to actually move out of Morzine as well. So that's really what the motivation was. I wanted to be challenged and challenged more, and focus a bit more on my career again rather than just my lifestyle.
Sure. Yeah, and that also curiosity and there was a ceiling on what you could do in Morzine, I imagine.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think it could have gone other ways, and I'm sure opportunities would have presented themselves, but I felt like I needed to really challenge. I wanted the challenge, and I wanted to, I think, maybe go back into business as well, as that was my degree, and that was something that I'd always been interested in, was running businesses.
Sure. So you go to Fisher, and Fisher is in, as you said, mid investment cycle. Can you explain what that means?
So investment cycles typically, well, I mean, they can be anything, but in the bike industry, they've been typically around about 5 years and have started to extend longer than that. But normally PE looks to 3 to 5 years investment cycles.
That means
So
from the time that they invest to the time that they exit is the investment
exactly.
cycle. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think Fisher was invested in around 2006, I think, 2006, 2007. And I joined at the beginning of 2009. So yeah, 2 to 3 years into their initial investment, looking for an exit, typically in another 2 to 3 years' time. So it was very focused on growth. And it was at a time when the Beijing Olympics had delivered a lot of really good track results for the UK, and the road market was absolutely thriving in the UK. And that business had some really good road brands. I joined, and the growth, I think I joined when it was turning over around about 15 million. And then by the time we exited, it was around about 35. So there was quite significant growth
Yeah,
at
that
the
is, but
time.
those were also macroeconomic factors that came into play. I guess when the PE came into Fisher, what were they seeing as opportunities for the growth? Like what were the levers? So if we can help people understand that when PE comes in, they see an opportunity, or you can probably phrase this better, but what I understand is that they see an opportunity for growth through capital, through injecting money or injecting resources or injecting personnel. What did they see in Fisher that was under utilized or under optimized?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I wasn't there at the time that the sale happened, but what I do know is the business was sort of three generations of family owned business. And, you know, it was growing, but it wasn't growing as quickly as it probably could. It wasn't seizing all the opportunities that were probably out there that could be seized. And I think that the two brothers, the Fisher brothers that were running it at the time, were looking also for an exit as well.
Retirement.
Yeah, and PE look at one of the things that PE looks at is, with more investment, could this grow faster? Are there efficiencies that we can drive within the business? And quite often that is systems and processes, because, you know, if you think about an organizational stages of growth, quite often, you know, you start off as an entrepreneur and you run a business and you grow a business, and then it grows into a few more people, and processes probably aren't the thing that starts off as being something you look at in a business, because everybody's doing everything. But then as you grow, you need to develop your processes. And often you find with founder-led businesses that there are probably efficiencies that can be put into the business if you've got a investment company that's got experience of doing that. So quite often they'll look at things like processes and then IT stacks as well. And are there efficiency gains that you can get there as well, which would then drive, you know, greater margin, and obviously that trickles down to the bottom line and delivers a greater return. So those would have been the things that they would have looked at the time when they made that investment analysis.
And so then aside from you had mentioned that there were some macroeconomic tailwinds that were happening at the time. Were you also able to do some improvement on the efficiency side? Like what took you guys from 15 million to 35 million over those
Yeah,
years?
I mean, I think there's a number of things as well, is going out and winning more brands as well. So obviously you can add brands, you can add more salespeople, you can drive business that way. So, and then also developing things like own product, own brand, where, you know, on certain categories, it makes sense to have an own brand, because then obviously the margin is greater because you're not having to buy a proprietary brand. So there's a number of different ways in which that business grew. But yeah, there were some fantastic tailwinds, not the least things like SRAM moving into the road category, and obviously adding a whole bunch of categories that weren't in that portfolio. Also, SRAM has been a brand that's acquired other brands as well. So that's also natural growth. Then you had things like smart training, indoor training, and that company at the time had Tax, when Tax was owned by Tax, not Garmin. So that was, you know, a huge amount of growth as well. And then just generally road was growing quite a lot. SRAM also was growing a lot. more salespeople into more dealers, into more retailers. At the same time, whether or not people now think about it positively, but there were businesses that were at the forefront of the e-com boom in cycling,
Sure,
like
Wiggle, yeah.
yeah, and they were
Pro Bike Kit,
selling products all over the world. So
right?
that benefits whoever's supplying them.
Yep.
And then efficiencies would have been things around supply chain, buying better, holding the right stock. Um, so yeah, things like that.
Yeah, because the conversation that we'll get into a little bit later is that cycling is generally a slow burn business, and your kind of career kicked off in the cycling business with this a lot of growth. And but if you pull back the layers, you can see that there were some factors that assisted there. Obviously, your efficiencies and the way and having capital is going to help. But generally, I think from our conversation that we had, and I think in this conversation, what we see is that cycling's a slow burn business. Cycling is mature. It's not like software. So I just want to kind of throw that in there because I guess so. Getting into the sale, then the Fisher, the private equity firm that owned Fisher at the time, then exited. Is that what happened?
Yeah, it was actually quite an interesting story. The PE firm that invested in Fisher was also one of the PE firms that invested in Wiggle, but at stage, I think it was the second investment cycle in Wiggle. So that they actually did very, very well out of selling Wiggle on, which was quite funny because whenever we would meet with them, there was obviously the very successful exit for Wiggle, and then there was Fisher, which was much smaller. And we always felt a little bit like we're not quite as good as Wiggle in their eyes. We're obviously a lot smaller, and I think our margins are also not quite as favourable
Sure.
as Wiggles were. And
But
also,
we know how that went.
yeah, exactly, exactly. We know how that went.
Yeah, so
So
Wiggle, for anybody that doesn't know, but Wiggle eventually was liquidated eventually in 2022, I think, or 23.
yeah, and I think so. But it wasn't always rosy with Fisher either. I think around about 2012, we had some real challenges where some of the own brand initiatives hadn't given a return in the time frame the PE company would want, because trying to grow a brand from nothing is probably a longer cycle than 2 to 3 years, which is what the PE firm were looking for as an exit. There were some decisions internally that made to relocate the supply chain from the UK to Taiwan, where a lot of the products were bought, and that ended up in quite chaotic results whereby we had all the wrong inventory at the wrong time. And so, yeah, it really went into a really difficult phase where it actually ran out of capital, and the C-suite was completely changed. And at that time, I was head of brands, and our finance CFO left, the CEO left, and
And
the
that was
chairman
still owned by the PE at this
still
time.
owned by the first
Okay.
PE company. So a new CEO was recruited, and really it was at that time where there was something really significant that's always stayed with me. The new CEO came in and talked to us as a senior leadership team and said, we can recover this business, but it's not going to be one thing that's just going to save this business. It's going to be us looking at everything, and almost like a series of lots of little paper cuts, lots of lots of little things are going to help improve this business. And so we just looked at everything and made improvements everywhere. And what that did was it completely rescued the business. We went through a massive turnaround, completely exceeded the PE's expectations on what they would recover, and successfully sold the business in 2016 to one of our competitors. And then that formed and became
Zyro.
Zyro Fisher.
Right. And so did you stay on with the new ownership?
Yeah, and I think for me, going through that turnaround really galvanized the whole team around making that business successful. And that's something that has really stayed with me about culture. And then the business joined Zyro Fisher, and really Zyro acquired the business. So a lot of the Fisher staff actually left in that acquisition because of the synergies of combining warehouses together. But I stayed on and I became head of brands for Zyro Fisher, which was exciting because we went from a portfolio of around about 25 brands to then 50 brands. And we were then backed by a different PE company.
So initially, the Zyro was family owned when they purchased
Yeah.
Fisher. Okay, but there's something that's bothering me. I wanted to ask you. So you said that there was an initial bump, and then when you were with Fisher, there was an initial bump of growth, and then there was a bit of a stagnation or a little bit of a crisis in the middle, and then it bumped up again due to some additional. So there was like kind of two moments there you mentioned,
Mhm.
to go from the 15 million to the 35 million. So it wasn't all kind of milk and honey. It
It was
was
challenging. Yeah. I mean, I would describe my time at Zyro Fisher. So from being at Fisher and then Zyro Fisher, I think it was about 12 years, but it felt like I worked for four different businesses in
right.
that time because of the different cycles they went through. So yeah, Fisher was in crisis mode in around 2012, 2013.
And you
Um,
mentioned that there was a lot of investments happening that maybe were not being realized as quickly as they wanted. So they saw some growth initially, pumped more money into it. Then maybe it wasn't quite exactly the right investments, but then you were able to right the ship a bit before the exit.
Yeah, exactly. So then we
Okay.
had 2 years of writing the ship before the exit, turning it around. I mean, I think it did get to one point where, it did run out of cash, and it was at the point where the bank could have pulled all its funding and it could have gone
Wow.
into administration.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. But it was, it was close. So it really was in crisis.
I have to ask you, Nick, you seem really zen. Have you always been this way?
No,
No? But
I
when
think
you're really stressed, do you still seem zen?
I think I am now, but I think that's because having been through, I think when you go through difficult circumstances, it equips you to then deal with them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was really challenging.
Yeah,
Um,
like I mean, when because I follow you, we met each other back in 2015, I think 2014, through Santini, and you had always had this, at least I had kind of watched your career from afar. And when you joined White, there was a lot happening and COVID and everything like that, but you always seem very, very zen. Is there some kind of way that you have managed the stress of this job, specific techniques or things like that? Or is there anything you can tell people that maybe
yeah,
have
I think,
challenges with stress that you can help them with?
yeah, there's a number of things. There's that saying of control the controllables. So if it's something that you can't control, then you can't really worry about it.
It's
And then
destructive. If you worry about something that's out of your control, it's purely destructive.
exactly. And I also think that if you've done as the best job that you can do that day, then that's the best that you can do. And I don't ever have a problem sleeping because I know that I show up, turn up, and do the best that I can do. And I care deeply about what I do. And that's all that I can't do anymore. So
It's perspective. It's a bit of a perspective where, there's only so much you can control, because I think that's what they say is like stress comes from, worrying about things or some sort of unresolved, task. But if there's things that you absolutely cannot control, you have to sort of remove yourself from them. It sounds like.
and I think, there have been people that I've worked with over the years who I absolutely admire, and they give you nuggets of information. And one of them was Peter Woods, who he was the president of Durrell Sports, British guy, but living in the US. And he did the sale of Durrell Sports to Pon. And so I worked for him when I was at Cannondale. And I remember he said to me one day, Nikki, there is no good news or bad news. It's just news at our level. We just get, and so that's kind of how it feels every day. There's always new news. It's not either good or bad. It's just new, and then you just deal with it.
Yeah.
Um,
I think one kind of nugget in that realm is like things are never as good or as bad as they first seem. You kind of have to try and keep some perspective.
but I also feel that my role is in sort of solving problems and finding ways forward. That's my natural role at home as well. So I think as well, like I said, I like a challenge. I don't know why I like a challenge, but I just seem to like a challenge. If things become too easy,
You get bored.
I get bored and lose
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah. And
Um,
I share that feeling.
so I think all of those things together just mean that, I don't shy away from challenge. and I probably maybe I guess thrive a little bit on it. And therefore, because I know that it doesn't impact me, I mean, obviously it will impact you a little bit, but I don't let it overwhelm me for long periods of time, means that I'm able to maintain a healthy lifestyle while dealing with challenging situations.
Yeah, it's sort of a prerequisite for someone in your role, sounds like.
Yeah.
So Fisher sells to Zyro, still
Mhm.
family owned. And then it sounds like Zyro was wanting to, which became Zyro Fisher. And then Zyro Fisher was wanting to exit then as well.
Yeah, so Zyro Fisher, so Zyro was family owned, but as part of the acquisition of Fisher, the couple that owned Zyro sold majority of their shares, not all their shares, but the majority of their shares. So they were still board members, but then there was a new CEO who was the ex-finance director of Zyro, became CEO. The CEO of Fisher became the chairman of Zyro Fisher. And then the two businesses went together, which was a bit of a culture clash. And anybody in the UK or even global industry that would know Zyro and Fisher would know that they're very different types of businesses. One is heavily process oriented, one is not. So Fisher wasn't heavily process oriented, always did the right thing. I would say it was probably like a graceful swan, whereas Zyro was very process oriented, wouldn't do anything without having the process in place and it being accredited to ISO 9002. So
Sure.
very different. And so that was quite an interesting time because integrating those two businesses, was challenging. Obviously, on paper, great, you've got two warehouses, now just have one. But actually, bringing different ways of doing business together for two companies, it requires quite a lot of integration.
And what was your role at that time in Zyro Fisher, and how are you part of the integration?
So my role was head of brands, but whilst at Fisher, I was also responsible for marketing. But in Zyro Fisher, there was a marketing director, so my role was to pass and transition my marketing and e-commerce responsibilities onto that person at Zyro Fisher, whilst then learning the brand portfolio of Zyro alongside my brand responsibilities for Fisher. So I was involved with integrating certain parts of the business and then really getting to develop a team responsible for all the brands within that portfolio.
And did you so being head of brand for a distributor, what does that entail?
Yeah, it's quite a commercial role. So you're managing I guess the P&L for each of those brands. You're managing the supplier relationship, but then you're working very closely with the sales team to ensure that you're furnishing them with everything they need to make that brand successful in your market. But
It's
yeah, a large part of the role is managing all the brand owners.
hugely important for a distributor because at the end of the day, I mean, obviously there's procurement and service, but having the best portfolio is what makes or breaks a distributor at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, hugely important. Yeah, and the brands have choice about who they can be distributed by. And then equally, the retailers have choice about which brands they buy. So you do feel like you're really stuck in the middle of two. You don't really feel like it feels like you are kind of servicing both sides all the time, trying to keep both sides, on side to buy your brand or to remain being distributed by you.
And Zyro Fisher, what was what was sort of their sweet spot in terms of brand? Was it premium? Did they want to cover a certain range? Were they better in
Yeah,
bikes?
the focus was really around parts and accessories initially, wanting to make sure that we had the top tier brands in any category that we choose to be in.
Premium.
Premium, yeah,
Premium. Okay.
yeah, not necessarily premium. I guess you could say premium, but it might be a category that wouldn't necessarily be seen as premium, but we would just have the best
Hmm.
brand within that. So that was really the goal, and then also then set up a bike division later on as well, and looking at adding bikes to the portfolio. Really, because at one point or another, you kind of peak out how much you can do in parts and accessories, and obviously because you are backed by PE who are expecting growth, then you need to be looking at other ways in which you can
Sure.
add to
Generate
the
growth.
top line.
Yep.
So part of that was obviously brands and new categories, as well as also going into new markets. So there was a view as well about becoming kind of a European super distributor and having distribution in some of the major European markets.
But did this change after Brexit?
No, it didn't actually. No, it didn't. It didn't. Well, I mean, certain things did change because of Brexit. Really looking at having a bonded warehouse was one of them. But no, that piece had already happened kind of pre-Brexit. But then that was great because you had distribution facilities in mainland Europe as well as in the UK.
Okay.
So yeah, those were kind of like the goals of Zyro Fisher. But interestingly, so Zyro Fisher was established in 2016, and within about 20 months, it went through another exit.
Right.
So it went through an exit much quicker than it was planning to.
Because?
So there were a number of things around that exit. One was the PE company that had invested in Zyro Fisher to make that acquisition possible had believed they could get a return earlier because a lot of synergies had been created. You've taken businesses that were roughly the same size. Let's just say, they were roughly the same size of turnover. You've put them together and then you've taken a whole bunch of cost out.
Yeah, the staff. Yeah.
So the staff, the warehouse.
And so they were ready to exit, and they did exit.
Yeah, so they exited. And then the other piece around why was because of this strategic initiative around acquiring a mainland European-based distributor and wanting to have an investor who had, I guess, experience of going into those types of markets, whereas the one that Lloyds Development Capital and the way that deal was structured, that wasn't part of the initial investment plan. So a second exit, a secondary buyout is what you call that, happened about 20 months in, and that buyout meant that the original founders of Zyro were completely bought out at that time as well. So that was another kind of driver for it. And the original PE investment firm stayed in, but in a much smaller way. So they left a little bit of ownership in, and then
took some money off the table and left
took most of their money off the table.
Okay.
And then another PE company came in, and so that was in end of 2018. Then what for me, and at that time, the portfolio, there were parts of the portfolio that were going really well, and there were other parts of the portfolio that weren't. And I mean, these are my own personal thoughts, but I felt that at that time the business did become quite leveraged. It carried quite a lot of loan notes and bank debt, to enable that deal to happen.
Sure.
And that meant that the business at that time, I don't know, maybe around 70 something million, its kind of goal to give a return to that deal meant it needed to grow to about 100 million. And that's quite some chunky growth.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is, when you get into that situation, it's a pretty tall task to.
Yeah, I think it's a possible task, and it could be done through a buy and build, which is quite a typical private equity model, which is where they'll buy a business and then they'll look for other businesses that they can then add on, and then there'll be synergies with that.
There's ways to do it, but it felt hard. It sounded
like it was quite hard, and also we were having to hit some quite aggressive goals leading up to that transaction, because when you're going to an exit, you want to make sure you're on your numbers. So it was like, oh, the exit's going to happen this month, you've got to hit budget, and then it doesn't happen, it goes on to another month and another month and another month. So you're being driven quite hard. And then I think, so this would have been going into 2019, and I think the market had started to actually slow down at that point, and the growth wasn't there. And so then you had that challenge, and then you went into 2020,
COVID.
And then COVID happened.
But that was a complete anomaly, I suppose.
Yeah. And there was a number of dynamics within that as well. But there was some interesting stuff that happened during that time as well. One of the things that was really great about Zyro Fisher at my time was we were suddenly a really, really strong, big player. And our ability to go out and win new brands was, I think, became easier. So brought on multiple new brands at that time. And that was also part of my role, was going around the world, meeting brands and pitching to brands. And I loved that part.
I bet. That
Yeah.
sounds fun.
Yeah, it was really good fun. And yeah, secured some really, really, really great brands. And part of that was also going into setting up the bike division and bringing some brands into the portfolio, because there aren't many top tier bike brands out there that aren't distributed by themselves
Sure.
in the UK market.
Right. And so I know you did move into, you were that, you got your, would that have been your first managerial role then when you moved to Cannondale?
So I mean, I was on the board at Zyro Fisher running the brand team.
You did join the board.
Yeah, I joined the board when it became Zyro Fisher,
Okay.
running the brand team. So I worked really closely with,
Management.
um, yeah, finance director, sales director. I think also, even prior to that, being part of the senior leadership team at Fisher means you're really, really exposed to everything that's going on. So you have a very good understanding of how the business is being run. And then the other thing I did at Zyro Fisher was I worked on an ERP implementation upgrade project. So for anybody who doesn't know, that's kind of like your back office system.
Of course, yeah.
And I did a 6 month sabbatical on that project. So you get a really good understanding of how
All
every
the processes,
is
yeah. Because
all linked
you
together.
basically you take the whole business down to bare
Yeah.
metal and you build it up from nothing.
Yeah. And you build all the processes from scratch. And
Right.
so whilst people might not want to do that, I think it was a really valuable part of my career, because it gave me a much broader aspect of operational parts of the business. So all of those things happened, but I hadn't been in a role. Most of my roles had been commercial. I'd either run marketing, e-commerce, sales, or brand.
Sure.
Um, but worked really closely with, for example, worked super closely with supply chain, because as running the brand P&L, the brands are always on at you for placing orders. When are you going to be placing orders? How are you hitting your targets? So you need to be working really closely with your demand planning team to make sure that, you know, the pipeline of product that you've got coming in is the right product, it's coming in at the right time, and that you're balancing the right amount of inbound supply with the expectations of the brand, because obviously the brand wants you to be hitting certain goals.
These are
So
small details here.
yeah.
Small detail. Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
for a distributor.
Yeah, so it did, but then during COVID, actually, yeah, I had a call from a recruiter asking me about this role, and I thought, oh, I'm not sure about the role. So I think I just ignored the call for
A
about
Canada,
3 times.
Cannondale,
Yeah,
you're saying at Cannondale.
Cannondale. I think
Yeah,
I
yeah.
ignored the call for 3 times. I don't know if I knew it was Cannondale actually when they were them at that
Sure.
time,
Okay.
just recruiting me for a role. And you get lots of calls. So, and then I remember we were in our camper van in a lovely North Devon campsite on a beach, and the phone rang again, and I answered it, and I thought, you know, why not? Okay, yeah, I'll hear more. And so I took the call, and I think it was because the person had left me a message saying, I'm going to call you once more, and if you don't call me back, then I'll assume you're not interested. And I thought, well, that's not good, because I'm always, one of the other things I always say to myself is always take a coffee, always take a meeting. You never know what
Sure. You
you
never
learn.
know. Yeah. You never know.
And I'm so glad I did. So anyway, it turned out it was Cannondale, and literally I went through a process, and it took about 3 weeks. It was so quick. So from like the end of August 2020, happily working at Zyro Fisher to most extent, to I think about the third week in September, I'd had 4 meetings. And I think I'd had 6 meetings, some of them in person, most of them virtual, because the US was still locked down then.
This is 2020. This is full blown COVID.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, and accepted the role. And so yeah, then
Why
handed my notice.
why did you accept this role? Because Cannondale, the prestige of it, the challenge, you were kind of getting bored
Number
of.
of factors. So first one was, we've talked about what it was like running 50 brands and being in the middle between the retailer and the brand. And this was now being the brand. And I thought, wow, what I'd really like is at distributor level, you're trying to deliver the brand strategy in your market, but you don't own the brand strategy. You don't set the brand strategy. And you're also run quite thin across multiple brands as well.
Sure.
And I thought it would be great to go and work for a brand where you can be much more closely involved with what is the strategy for that brand. So that was one of the things that I really liked about it. The other one was it was Cannondale, which I thought, well, that's
Of
a
course,
great,
yeah, of course.
fantastic brand, huge amount of heritage. Does really, my predecessor had done a really good job of growing the brand in the UK market. So I really liked that about it as well. And then I guess the third pillar of why I was interested was it was a general manager position.
Yeah.
So it was managing director. So I would have responsibility for all aspects of the business. And that was something that I thought, well, that's a good challenge. I have a great awareness of how finance operates, how operations is run, but I've only really been responsible for commercial. So I'd love to add those two big pieces into my mix as well. So those are the three things that, really made me want to do it.
Tracks. It totally tracks with everything kind of that built up to that moment. And so you're in the middle of COVID. It looks like there was a sale to taken private by pawn during your time there. I mean, you're seeing everything here.
Yeah, I know. Well, it was quite funny because actually the day that we announced I was joining was, I think it was the day after they announced that they were actually selling the whole of Durrell Industries to Cerberus, which is a massive US PE company. That was the first deal that got announced. And that because Durrell was a public, well, it still is because Durrell Industries still exists, but it was a public company listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange. Anytime there's anything like that happens, they have to publicly announce it. So I joined knowing that they were selling the whole business. And then my first kind of like 4 or 5 months were, well, actually, that deal didn't go through because the shareholders couldn't agree a price. So then that deal was completely off the table. But that was selling Durrell Industries, of which Durrell Sports was one of three divisions. There was Durrell Junior, which is in the kind of like, I guess, baby space, like car seats and things like that, those types of brands. And then there's a furniture business as well. And it was all being sold. And then because of COVID, so I joined my first day, I think was the like 6th of January 21. COVID boom was now kind of like being experienced around that time. It was decided that actually, even though the Durrell Industries deal had fallen away, they would actually carve out Durrell Sports because the trajectory for Durrell Sports was looking really positive, and then just sell that. So yeah, that kind of process kicked off probably halfway through that year, and then it ended at the end of that year. So yeah, that was an interesting time as well.
And so obviously this is you're getting a lot of experience at this point of, again, it's for the UK market. So you're the managing director of the UK market at this time. Then you've got in and I would love to dive into COVID, but I've talked about COVID a lot on this, and
Yeah.
I want to be respectful of your time. And then so you take this role at Whyte. So you want to tell us a little bit about Whyte and what the situation was and why you took that role, because this is kind of, I think, where everything kind of comes together with,
Mm.
you actually being the CEO of a brand and being, private equity involved as well.
Yeah. So the drivers for that was Cannondale was fantastic, and it went through that sale process, which was also, again, everything is just interesting. You just learn and things that you didn't know before, particularly dealing with taking a public company, which then went private, and all the things that are involved in that as well. And then obviously then being owned by Pon, and then Pon wanting to put their own strategic initiatives around how they're going to grow the brands. What that really meant around for Cannondale and the way that it was structured is it went from having regional managing directors to actually then moving back to, well, not moving back, but to moving to a centrally functional led business. So having leaders of each of the functions based in the US well, ideally in the US because it's a US brand, but it was also a really big headquarters in the Netherlands as well. So that was kind of really where the decision making, the strategy was then coming from. And I was asked if I would relocate, but I didn't want to relocate my family. My husband's very happy where he is. My son's very happy at school. I live near my family. we don't really want to leave where we are for the time being. So that wasn't really going to be an option for me, unless the destination is like amazing and we could go and do all our hobbies right on our doorstep, then we might consider it. But flat Netherlands and Connecticut wasn't really motivating us. So I realized I needed to think about what I wanted in the future. And for me, I've always wanted to have a seat at the table. I've always wanted to be able to contribute to the long-term vision or the strategy of a business. I feel that's where I feel I get the most reward. I feel like I've got a point of view and I have the opportunity to share that point of view. I'm not motivated by titles, status. Obviously, being compensated for what you contribute is important, but it's not being that I really wanted to be a CEO or I really wanted to have that title. I just want to feel like I am contributing to the strategy of a business.
And you had the preparation to do that as well. You had seen enough.
Yeah, I felt absolutely confident. I felt
Right.
very confident I could step up from being a director of brands to an MD, and felt very confident that I could step up from being an MD to be a CEO.
Sure.
And I felt very eyes open to what the private equity model looked like, having been through, by that point, worked for three private equity backed businesses, and being through lots of different cycles of the PE investment, whether it's mid-cycle, exit, acquisition, secondary buyout. I feel like I'd seen quite a lot, and I'd been part of a senior leadership team, but not led a business through an exit process. An exit is when you sell the business to a new investor. And so I knew I wanted to be in a strategic position. It was important that it was in the UK because we weren't planning on moving. So it either needed to be a British brand or a brand that was headquartered in the UK.
Right.
So Whyte got in contact, and I thought, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about jumping back into the private equity model, because I'd quite enjoyed being in a public company and then a private company again. But I actually thought I like a challenge, and I could lead the exit. And because my eyes are more like open to some of the challenges around PE, I went into meeting the PE firm and was very clear about what I thought the business would be worth when it came round to them exiting. And the reason why that was so important to me was I know what it's like to have unrealistic goals
Expectations. Yeah.
and what that drives in a culture, and how
Yeah.
that drives a huge amount of stress and strain on the people. And I thought, I don't want that for myself, and I don't want that for my team, because that's not a nice culture that I'm then going to step into. So it was really clear that, obviously, I'd seen, to just give a little bit more background about Whyte, it was founder owned until 21, when it was sold to private equity in around about January 21. And so it was purchased or sold at the kind of peak of COVID on
Tough
a set
time.
of
Tough
numbers.
time to purchase, or good time to sell. Tough time to purchase.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew what the company had been bought for. So that was one of the things that was important. And then also how a business, how the debt looks in a business, because servicing debt as well is super challenging if you've got too much debt. If the deal was done, and by debt I mean borrowing money from the bank,
Well,
because it's
yeah.
incurring huge amounts of interest.
And just to give a little more clarity, so like what happens is when these companies, sometimes when these PE firms, typically they will finance the purchase to the company itself. So it could go, what are some of the ranges of how much of the debt is financed in these deals? Like between 50 and 60%, more or less? Can you help?
Yeah, I think it could be around about maybe 50-50. I don't know if there is a standard.
Right.
Um, but and also, the model is changing because interest rates aren't as low as they used to be, and that put
Sure.
a huge amount of strain on the whole PE model.
But to put all that debt onto a company, this is where PE gets kind of a bad rap because they do sometimes structure it in such a way, and I guess if you look at it in a more cynical way, it's like, well, they're just trying to make a deal. Whoever's doing these deals is just trying to make a deal and get out. But like you said, if there's realistic expectations and things are structured correctly, obviously this can be very, very sustainable. And so that was one thing that you had to make very, very clear was that, okay, guys, like this is what I see here. Do you agree with me? And if you, unless we find an agreement here, it's going to be hard for me to do this job. Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, exactly. So it was that very frank conversation early on before I decided to join. And that, I think by having that and knowing what I knew about the P model made me, go into it with that set out from the start. Because to your one of your earlier questions when we first started talking was about how do I remain zen? Well, I think you learn from situations and you just can apply all that knowledge to everything that you then do. So if I think back to some of the times of the Fisher days or the Zyro Fisher days, there were some really difficult times in that. It was quite a high stress, high anxiety environment,
Environment.
and so I wasn't going to want to walk back into that.
And so you needed to have some assurances that there was clarity and that there was
Understanding, really.
understanding, right, with reality,
I
basically.
a reality, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the first meetings was, thank you for sending me all your numbers. I don't think it's realistic for you to get back what you've put into this business
Oh,
on an
wow.
exit.
What did they say? Did they know?
I think they did know.
Yeah.
I think that there's always the rose tinted view of what ifs, but they did know. And so then we had a very pragmatic conversation about, well, what
Yeah.
do we think?
What's a realistic goal?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm a very pragmatic person. That's just my nature. I will probably just tell you how it is rather than feel like I need to make something better than it is. Because to be honest, I don't want to be having to then carry that and expectation and then continuously disappoint.
Yeah. I mean, look, when I kind of watched your progress from afar and on LinkedIn, we'll say, and I saw that you entered as the CEO in 2024, I think it was, I was like, ooh, that's going to be tough. But it sounds like you knew that too, because, just because you were able to put yourself in a position to where that the expectations were realistic. And I think, I guess I have to ask you, Nikki, like, are you seeing sort of a slower realization? Like, was there a time where, just obviously anecdotally, but that you saw brands sort of in denial of the situation and kind of rejecting these sort of PE? Like, can you speak to what you see in the market or what you saw in the market over the last couple of years around this topic?
Yeah, I can speak about my what I've experienced as well, where there's this kind of view of it is super tough, or well, that's just happening in the UK, that's not happening elsewhere.
Right. Right.
That I've definitely experienced that in previous roles. And I'm thinking COVID definitely wasn't a UK only boom. I've seen that, well, yeah, okay, maybe it's mechanical bikes that are the problem and that electric's gonna, be the thing that is gonna solve all the problems. So yeah, I have seen like unrealistic.
And this is kind of a big difference between success and failure, I think, then, where if you are able to, I don't know if it's pride or if it's wanting to save face or wanting to put on a certain type of an image, but I guess what you're saying, and it seems simple, but it's not easy, is you really have to be radically candid with all the stakeholders in order to have your best fighting chance in a situation that maybe COVID where some of the investments were just really poorly timed.
Yeah, I think the other thing is integrity. That's it's a great word and maybe gets used a bit too much, but I feel like the thing that I can own is my own integrity. So if everything I do or say I do believe in, then I feel comfortable with that. And that again probably comes back to, how do you manage stress or how do you manage anxiety? If you've promised something but you don't think you can then deliver it, that's going to cause you anxiety and stress.
Sure.
So I wouldn't want to put myself in that position. But equally I do want to stretch myself and challenge myself and stretch my team and reach for the stars. So you do want to put down that there is opportunity, there are things that we can go after. I don't want to or underperform, but I definitely feel that integrity is really important. And I've been in meetings where I might be the only division that is putting forward a set of numbers that shows a decline, but I'm surrounded by peers that are all showing growth. And I'm thinking, I don't know if this is career ending.
Yeah.
I'm presenting this budget, but I do know that when it came to then delivering the budget, I'm like delivering what I said that I would do,
Sure.
and perhaps that isn't being delivered elsewhere. So yeah, it's difficult. I can only speak for myself and
What's
how I,
worked what's worked for you.
yeah, and
So
what's right for me.
we've we're I know I wanted to be respectful of your time, but do you want to tell us a little bit about Whyte and kind of what your plans are for Whyte?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's been great over the last 2 years, and I can say that now. If you'd asked me probably, I don't know, midsummer last year, I probably would have looked a bit more stressed than I do than I am now. But yeah, Whyte has been going through a turnaround. Like every bike business, I think, has had to turn around because of COVID. But Whyte's been on a really great journey.
And
I think when I
what are some of what are some of the kind of the milestones or the actions that you've taken to put you guys in this position?
Yeah, I think so. There's a number of different things that have all just helped Whyte get to where it is today. I joined just over 2 years ago. I joined a business that had the wrong strategy at the wrong time, was making some significant losses, had limitations on cash because it was discounting product, not making enough margin, therefore not covering its costs, therefore eating away at its cash reserves. Anybody who can do basics maths knows that you're going to then run out of cash.
Yeah.
Had a bank breathing down its neck saying what's going on, because there was some bank debt, not a huge amount of bank debt, interestingly, but there was bank debt in there, and if the bank then pulls out, then that's also cash that you don't then have. I had a team that were demotivated. They'd missed their goals for the last, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. They'd gone through this great investment, all these promises, and nothing had materialized. The headcount had almost doubled and then had been restructured. They'd been told that they were going to all relocate to a different place, which was miles from where they lived. They'd rationalized the range enormously, so focused very much on very expensive, high-end electric mountain bikes, and then cleared a lot of the mechanical bikes. And I walked into a business that some days it wasn't even shipping a bike. And I was like, how is this sustainable? I mean, we were in midwinter, but I was like, we haven't shipped a bike today. And I've got 35 people on my,
Yeah.
payroll.
Yeah. The
Warehouse.
meter is running.
Yeah. And the other thing was, because the business model wasn't really sustaining the cost base, there had been this new strategy, which was around investing in trail centers as a way to own the experience of hiring a mountain bike and then managing the sale of those e-mountain bikes at a trail center, and therefore taking more margin because you're not paying a retailer margin. But that became a huge distraction for the business
Sure.
because the business has no understanding of what it's like to own a hire center in a forest and all the staff that's associated with that, and managing a landlord. We had a mixture of landlords from the Crown Estate owned one of them, as well as the Forestry England. So that was like a huge amount of complexity. And then putting really expensive electric mountain bikes in a forest is just waiting to be broken into. So that happened about 5 times. So this was what I walked into. So there was quite a lot to do. But what was underneath it all, which made it all possible, was the quality of the products is so good. The engineering, the R&D, the product team, and even the after sales team, they're all so good that one, the retailers love Whyte Bikes because they ride really well, they're really well made, they're designed in the British weather, so they withstand any kind of conditions that you throw at them. So there's a huge amount of goodwill from our retailers, even if we're doing all sorts of things that don't align with them. But the product is really good. So if you've got product that's really good, it's actually easy to sell. And I've been in businesses where you haven't always had product that's really good in all categories, but the kind of mantra which comes from the Formula One heritage of the brand is only put products into the market that improve on riding. So
Sure.
when you ride a Whyte bike, you feel confident, you're inspired because it just rides really well because of the considered approach to engineering and how everything is taken into account. So knowing that the product was great was, well, I can fix all the other things because some of those are operational, some of those are commercial. So yeah, that's really what I went about. And I mean, we could spend probably another podcast talking about what we then went to do to try and turn the business around, but turn the business around, cutting a long story short, brought back in a lot of the commercial categories that we'd exited, brought down the price point of where we were aiming the bike so we could reach a wider audience, listen to the retailers. The retailers were asking us to do certain things and really listen to them, and then delivered on all of those promises. So we have much broader range now, still very focused on off-road. And I think the thing that's really made the difference around Whyte is we're really focused on who we are and what types of bikes we sell, which is why we're really focused just on off-road. So everything we put out there is really good. We're not in categories where we don't really have any authenticity or heritage in. And then we become really good at that. And then all our resources are focused on that. You're a small businesses, you have limited kind of brand and marketing budgets. You've got a small but great sales team, and they're all just focused on being the best off-road bike
Right.
brand
Yeah,
that we can be.
it sounds like you had this leasing business, which was taking energy away. You had some categories that were kind of bleeding energy, bleeding focus. So if you do, it sounds like at this size of business that there's a limit on how much people can focus on to be able to be successful. And so it sounds like you found that balance, or at least that's what's been behind the success that you've had over the last 6 to 12 months. So you're able to find that balance. So focus, and I always talk about focus on this podcast because it feels like focus is like the make or break topic in every business that I talk about, and every entrepreneur that I speak with or leader that I speak with, is that focus is just, it's like kryptonite. If you don't have if you're spread too thin, obviously it's going to dilute everything you're doing. So is there an exit time horizon that you're working with? Obviously, if that's confidential, we don't have to speak about it, but from the PE perspective, are you feeling like you're back on track from their expectations?
Yeah, so I'd say you're absolutely right. I'll answer both those sort of questions, but focus is super important. And I think the reason why Whyte, for me, I found it so much easier working for a business where I could believe in everything it was putting out there because I feel authentic in what I'm doing. And then I feel authentic when I'm standing up in front of potential acquirers and
Sure.
presenting a business plan. And then not only do I believe in it, the market and the media reviews, everything that we put out there, either wins reviews, wins 10 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, wins heads to heads with other massive global brands. So it's endorsed by third parties. And so just focusing on the things that we're really good at is,
It's the only way you can win.
yeah, it's the only way you win.
It's the
And
only way you can win.
yeah, and you've got so much competition out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could have another podcast talking about, we've just launched our Avanox bike. You've got to differentiate yourselves. And so we're really clear on where we sit,
Sure.
and what we do, and just be really good at it. So that,
Realistic about the growth expectations. It sounds
yeah,
like that was
exactly. And I think, again, standing in front of potential acquirers, some of the people that are, we call them interested parties when you're going through an exit. Some of them are looking at all the bike businesses that are for sale right now globally. And so they've got huge insights into the business, the 3-year business plans that all those brands are presenting. And I wasn't going to go and present a business plan that had this huge hockey stick growth, because I need to be the one that stands there and then delivers it.
well, yeah, because you might be there to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have realistic growth. It's going really well. We signed up a fantastic new distributor that we've been working on for some time, and that got announced last month. I think it got announced, and they're called Aspire. I've known them for a while. They operate in Central Europe, running 10 countries. That's going to deliver us a huge amount of growth in a region that we were active in, but in a really small way. We've got some other really great prospects for further global distribution, and really the goal for Whyte is to do more in our domestic market, and that's growing well, but we are growing internationally as well. But I want to grow in a manageable way that is sustainable and is the growth that we deserve, rather than something that it seems quite unrealistic. So that's where we are. I've forgotten now what your actual question was.
No, it was just if there was an exit time
That was
horizon.
it. Yeah, I'm not trying to swerve that. We are PE backed, and PE operates in an investment cycle.
Sure.
And going back to what we talked about at the beginning, those are typically probably around about 5 years now. It takes a little bit longer for people to realize their investments. We're not talking about the exit. We're talking about accelerating our growth. So I've gone through turnaround, get back to profitability as being the strategic goals of the business. And now
Okay.
we're in a phase which is all about accelerate our growth. Our mindset is shifting to growth. We are growing. Our market share is growing. And it's all, don't get me wrong, nothing's easy. Nothing's just given to you and handed to you on a plate, but we've got the right people. We've got great products, and we've got some really exciting new product coming out as well.
Well, Nikki, I'm gonna end it there because we've gone over a little over time, but this was super fun, and I knew when we spoke that we would get some amazing content here. So this was a very interesting journey into management, into the business, exits, private equity. So this was everything I had hoped it would be. Thank you again for coming on, and congratulations on an amazing career, by the way. If people want to reach you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Nikki Hawyes. That's the easiest way to find me. And yeah, no, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And you know what? It makes me sort of think about how full circle the kind of moment is, from how I discovered mountain biking in the Alps. And even I remember I used to ride with a guy who had one of the original Whyte bikes. And to actually then become full circle and manage a British-based, British homegrown mountain bike brand does feel like a real full circle moment for me.
Hey, we're all a little bit jealous, like, I think all of us listening. So enjoy it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye.